All right, guys, what is up? Welcome into our South Carolina versus Texas A&M preview edition of GC Live. Hope y'all are having a great week. We're going to dive into this thing here momentarily as the Gamecocks get ready to travel to College Station. But first, let us tell you about a couple of our great sponsors. First of all, we've been telling you about him for, 3, 4, 5 years now. It's our guy, Clint Hammond of CNG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797. NMLS number 71597. If you're not new to the show, you know the drill at this point. If you're in the market for a new home, hit up Clint. He's the man. He'll have some discussion with you about maybe who South Carolina should hire for the offensive coordinator role and probably about what mortgage setup you should use. 5-1 ARM, how much should you put down? How much should you be saving? All these different things. Clint's going to walk you through and just make it very, very simple for you. So, again, like we always say, if you're not in the market for a new home, obviously you don't need to call Clint. All we ask is that if that is something that is in the future for you, you give Clint an opportunity to earn your business at 803-422-6797.
And let's tell you about the folks over at Ferry Chevrolet, in business since 1926. Anybody been in business that long, they're doing something right. They're still doing something right over at Ferry Chevrolet, conveniently located now in Orangeburg, so convenient to Columbia, convenient to Charleston. But you can check out their inventory of new and used vehicles online at ferrychevrolet.com. That's F-A-I-R-E-Y, Chevrolet, ferrychevrolet.com. Led by a fourth-generation dealer, family-owned business, Joseph Ferry. Still keeping things rocking over there, 803-937-4531. And just like Clint with a mortgage, hey, maybe you're not in the market right now for a new or used vehicle, but if you are, we just kindly ask, keep Ferry Chevrolet in mind. Again, if you just want to go browse, maybe you're not really in the market, but you've been thinking about it. Maybe you actually are in the market. You can go easily check out their inventory online at ferrychevrolet.com. Check out their deals, check out their financing options, see if you see something that catches your eye. If it does, check them out, communicate with them right from their website, or again, give them a call, 803-937-4531. And for those of you in the state, an easy drive and well worth it to get over there to Ferry Chevrolet in Orangeburg. Again, ferrychevrolet.com.
All right, man, let's dive into this thing. We've already talked about it a little bit this week, but a just well-rounded, balanced, I feel like, dangerous Texas A&M team. There's a reason why they're number 3 in the country in the college football playoff rankings. There's a reason why some people are arguing they should be second or maybe even first. I still think Ohio State probably has that argument in the bag, in my opinion. But certainly when you start to look at some of the resume aspects, the fact that this is a well-rounded A&M team, the fact just like Indiana and Ohio State, they are unbeaten to this point, you can see why people may say that. And, Chris, I want to start with their offense. I think you think of a Mike Elko team, you think of what he does defensively, you think of when I think of his identity and his blueprint and what he brings into a new program, I think defensive side of the ball. I think tough-nosed. I even think a little bit old school. But this is a team, we'll get to their defense here in a second. They're still very, very good on that side of the ball. But it's a team that I just feel like doesn't really have many weaknesses on the offensive side of the ball. You look at Marcel Reed, he's done a fantastic job of improving as a quarterback. That's something. Have you ever noticed one of Clayton White's kind of go-tos, but one of the things he respects the most is when he watches tape on a guy from one season and then he watches tape on a guy the next season and just says, man, like this guy has gotten better. There's improvement here. He mentioned again the improvement this week with Marcel going from one year to the next. And we kind of saw him, I would say, on the early end of that at Williams-Brice Stadium last year. They were kind of in the middle of, is it going to be him? Is it going to be Connor Wegman? Kind of back and forth. Who are they going to sort of hitch their wagon to, basically? This is the direction they chose. It has worked out very, very well so far. I look at it good up front. They're athletic up front. They have good mobility up front. You've got a wide receiver duo and, a tight end duo. And even though they've had injuries at the running back position, Owens has been really, really good for them at running back. So I think when you start there, speaking of Clayton White, we've seen him have to match up with the Ole Miss offense here recently, the Alabama offense here recently. I'll be curious to see what he schemes up for this A&M offense this week.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of focus on that, Wes, on South Carolina's offense because, when you look at did the defense give up some plays against Bama and Ole Miss, particularly late in the game? Sure. But also you have to keep in mind that from a complementary football standpoint, South Carolina was not able to give Clayton White's defense enough help offensively in terms of moving the ball, but even more importantly, just scoring points to keep pace, right? You can't go on the road in Oxford, score 14 points, and expect to walk out. You can have a really good defensive performance and still lose that game. So South Carolina, in a lot of ways, has still been game for the challenge the last couple weeks. It's once again another week where you're going in saying, gosh, not only another top 10 team, which is, again, what they're facing in Texas A&M, an unbeaten team so far, but you're going in playing another very good offense. Now, you've got to recognize that, and we're going to get to this side of the ball, South Carolina's offense. Obvious, number one storyline going in. Can South Carolina score enough points and move the football enough to have this game be in the fourth quarter and have an opportunity to win? We'll get into that. But frankly, you're going to need another really good performance where you walk away from the game going, man, South Carolina played really well against another very good offense. Fair or not, that's what they're going to have to do. That's the task in front of them. Mike Elko, West, was talking about this during his presser this week. He's like, man, I don't know what South Carolina has done to the football gods to get this kind of schedule, but you can tell he's got his team on alert that, hey, this may be a 3-win, 1 SEC win South Carolina team, but look at who they've played. A&M, meanwhile, not taking away anything from what they've done. They've been extremely impressive to me in all three phases, done a great job coaching, all that. They have not played, as you've pointed out, a team with a winning SEC record. So the difference in how these two teams have been tested is obviously different. So to go back to Clayton White and the defense, they've got their hands full once again because you've got an experienced, talented front. I like how you put it, really no weaknesses because Marcel Reed's playing very well. He's been very efficient. He can run the football, whether it's scrambling or design runs. You've got receivers who can beat you downfield, but also in space. And even with Le'Veon Moss being out for quite a while for them, you've got Reuben Owens and several other backs that have been able to shoulder the load. And so that puts pressure on you defensively, but I think it also puts pressure on South Carolina's offense, which has been the biggest issue with this team this year. Got to go score some points to win. If you're Clayton White's bunch, can you turn in a performance like you've had the past few weeks and frankly other weeks this season where you're still shouldering the load and able to give your team a chance to allow for any offensive improvement that you may can show in this game if you're Carolina? Can you have that actually matter in this game? So it's another tall order for the defense.
Yes, it is. And, looking at this offense, man, I think in addition to just having athletes at all these positions, they kind of throw a lot at you. And they are pretty diverse in their run game. You are going to see like your zone reads, your inside zone, but you're going to see them get their offensive linemen out as pullers. You're going to see them run. I believe watching their film, there's some duo in there, which is actually kind of what Marcus Satterfield brought into South Carolina and was trying to make the base of their run game, which looks kind of like zone, just, naked eye. And then you start to look at it a little bit closer. If you see something that looks like inside zone, and then you see those two double teams right there off the bat, a lot of times I think that's duo. You're going to get trap, you're going to get counter, you're going to get a lot of different things. And then the interesting thing about Marcel Reed and his ability in the running game, they aren't going to rely on that. They're not going to say, hey, we're going to purposefully run him 25 times a game. But the athleticism is there, man. He will extend plays. He will throw on the run. He's not an incredibly high percentage passer, but enough. He's improved in that aspect a little bit too. Like I said, weapons around him. And I mean, they're truly like honestly, man, I hate to say it, but truly, like if I've been watching a bunch of offensive coordinators lately, looking at what A&M does, it's a lot like what I think Shane Beamer should maybe be looking into in terms of South Carolina's next hire, Like they just throw a lot at you, but it does not seem to be overly complicated on their side of things. A lot of it is just distributing the football, knowing where to go, knowing where is the defense weak in terms of, am I handing this off or am I flipping the ball out to the perimeter? And when you have the athletes they have at all those skill positions and then the QB run game to fall back on as well, it can just make it very, very difficult in terms of not being able to take away everything they can throw at you.
Yeah, Clayton White talked about the RPO game specifically and how, that's a challenge for any defense and certainly for his defense this week. How do you play it, right? Do you play man coverage, which you would like to do if you feel like you can, but they've got a really good receiving core. They've got the tight ends, they've got the backs. And then if you play man and you man up and you're turning your back on a very mobile quarterback, we know that he can get out of there, had the 50-something yard run against LSU. This is a guy in Marcel Reed that's quite good at extending plays, but he can also design run on you and he can scramble out of there and get yardage. So, the RPO game is just one part of it. They're going to mix it in, but he's done a really good job of making decisions. And the interesting thing, Wes, is in the throw game, I was going back and looking at some of Marcel Reed's metrics in the passing game. He hasn't been pressured a ton this season. This offensive line's done a good job protecting him. He's done a good job of getting the ball out. Hasn't been pressured a ton, but he actually has thrown his interceptions, so his bad decisions, I guess you could say, when he's not been pressured, right? So that creates even a little bit of a, tension for Clayton White of, obviously you want to affect the quarterback, but this is a guy who has 6 touchdowns and no interceptions per PFF when he's pressured. So how do you play that, right? And when you have an offense that doesn't really seem to have a lot of weaknesses, it becomes tough to just line up and say, let's go out and play defense, right? Yes, you've got the typical upset formula of turnovers, right? But this has been a team that's been pretty good in that department overall in terms of taking care of the football. They don't really beat themselves a lot. They can run the ball with their backs. They can run the ball with Marcel Reed. They can distribute the ball and do a good job of that offensively. So another tough test, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I mean, you're getting tough tests every week, essentially, at this point of the year if you're South Carolina. I mean, if you get, like you mentioned, turnovers, they're pretty good in that department. If you get into the 3 big keys when you get into tight games, if South Carolina can get this down to a tight game, red zone, turnovers, third downs. I'm going to get into A&M's third down defense here in a moment, but red zone, you're talking about 5th in the SEC in terms of scoring percentage if you're A&M. So about 92% of the time that they make it inside the opponent's 20, they're going to score. That's obviously a very, very good number. I like to look as much as anything, Chris, at the touchdown number. What percentage of the time that you get down there are you scoring touchdowns instead of field goals, turnovers, or turnovers on downs? And A&M pretty good at that point as well. They're 7th, which is, of course, just above middle of the pack here in the SEC. But comparatively, man, South Carolina sitting there 15th among the 16 teams in the SEC, scoring touchdowns on just half of their trips inside the red zone. So, I think when you look at this thing from a global standpoint, that's something, obviously, like if Carolina's going to pull an upset, we've talked about this in some of these other games. Can you pull an upset? You kind of have to flip some of the things that your opponents have been doing to put themselves in position to only have one loss if you're Ole Miss 2 weeks ago, or be undefeated if you're A&M this week. It kind of has to be one of those games where you're saying that's a little bit of an anomaly based on what we're used to seeing from that team. So can you kind of flip the script a little bit? Like if you want to narrow what the computers, what the kind of down-to-down numbers are telling you, I mean, this is almost a 3-touchdown line in this game. So you're going to need a lot of these things to narrow that thing down. To me, it is, can you flip that script in the red zone? Can you flip that script on third downs? Typically, in this day and age, if you're a winning team, you're going to be pretty good in those categories. A&M has been so far. And I think some of that is having that mobility at quarterback to fall back on. Typically, what do defenses hate? If it's 3rd and short, what do defenses hate at goal line? It's having to deal with that running quarterback. It's having to deal with tight ends that can block or go catch the football. I mean, those are typically things that are very, very advantageous for you on defense in red zone and 3rd down. A&M has both of those. And it's just really a tough matchup, I think, for South Carolina. I promise we're going to switch to defense here in a second. But I've got a lot of respect for what they've put together on offense there. And Colin Klein, the former quarterback, does a good job of dialing it up there too.
Yeah, he does. And a guy that, doesn't have a 15-year resume of being an offensive coordinator, proof that, you can find that guy, right? There's a lot of, you look up and down, which I've been doing lately, Wes, because there's been so much conversation about the offensive coordinator position here at South Carolina. It tends to be a time where you go through and say, okay, who's having success? What is their offensive scheme? What's their philosophy? What's their background, frankly, right? And most of us who've watched college ball for a while remember Colin Klein at K-State and was voted, 3rd, maybe, I think, in the Heisman vote. So obviously a sharp, heady guy, but not a guy who's been calling plays for 20 years and has done a really good job of structuring things. And I think, look, you also got to credit just the personnel that they've put together, right? Making the decision last year that, hey, we think Reed's going to be our guy, allowing him to continue to develop to where the player that South Carolina is facing this year, as you alluded to per Clayton White's comments, that the guy they faced last year, he was already pretty good, right? But he's now taken a leap and seems really, really comfortable in that offense. And they've got pieces all around him. Again, not many spots you go to and say, they're just not really very good here. They can do a lot of things very well. They've got depth, they've got talent, they've got experience.
That they do. All right, we're going to move over to the defense here for A&M momentarily. You know what else? What other resource I get stuck on is our guy Statawar, Parker Fleming on Twitter. He has his own website now too, cfb-graphs.com. And those of you who follow Parker on social media will remember he used to post these. He used to post some of them on Twitter from time to time. Now you can go check out pretty much every single game and just all the different matchups, at least from a statistical standpoint, and see, hey, where is there maybe a deficiency in this team, that offense versus that defense, and the reversal of that. And just to give you an idea, and I know these analytics and stats and all this, they aren't for everybody, Chris, but it's kind of interesting to me when your eye test, when the results on the field, and the kind of productivity in the traditional stats kind of match up with what the analytics are telling us as well. And so on Parker's graphics, blue basically means good, dark blue means elite, and then red is just like stop, like you're hurting our eyes here. And A&M, Chris, and there's about 15 categories for his main graph, and they're all blue. They're all some shade of blue for A&M. So that's across defense, offense, just every single way you can measure it. The one area, and then you get even deeper into it, man, there's like all these subcategories. Most of the subcategories, very blue as well. The one area is points per quality drive on defense. And so points per quality drive is essentially an area that measures what we saw. Y'all remember the LSU game for South Carolina on offense? You didn't get credit with being in the red zone, but you got to that like 30, 35, 40-yard spot. Quality drive is you got to the opponent's 40. And I think you have to have a first down within that. Like you can't have just gotten there. You have to have a sequence of downs inside the 40. And so offensively, points per quality drive are measuring how often do you take advantage of that. South Carolina, of course, not very good on that on offense. The one area for Texas A&M, they're 112th in the country in points per quality drive allowed on defense. So when teams have gotten to the 40, they haven't gotten there a ton, but when they have gotten to the 40, they have typically scored points. And so I don't know if that's here nor there. Typically, when you just have, if that's your path, if you have this little sliver, that's not a good sign, right? But I just think it speaks to the overall, just I would say overall depth and different ways this A&M team can beat you across the board, man.
Yeah, and we might not spend a lot of time on special teams, but they've been good there. They've got some scores on special teams in the return game. That's another area you have to be alert on. Shane Beamer pointed out they had a game-changing, fake punt that was successful for them against Missouri last week. Defensively, it's an interesting situation for A&M West, because you're right. Like, you kind of got to nitpick a little bit here and there to pick out the path. Defensively, they are still really good. And the thing that they do well is kind of similar to Oklahoma, right? They create havoc. Like, they tend to create a lot of negative plays. They've got Cassius Howell and that front, that front for A&M is not as highly ranked as we've typically seen it. A lot of years you roll out those guys, you go look back at their recruiting rankings. Here's 2 5-stars and 2 4-stars that were almost 5 stars. Like, that's what you're accustomed to. Now, they still have some cats like that, but Cassius Howell transferred from Bowling Green. Some of the other guys, maybe not as marquee names, but they've got experience and they are quite talented, and they can get after you up front. They can rush the passer. They do a really good job of creating havoc, which, as we all know, has been an issue for South Carolina with sacks, with tackles for loss, negative plays. So that's what you got to be on alert for. And that's what if you're Mike Furry, rest of the offensive staff, that's got to be top of mind when you're game planning and when you're actually calling the plays on Saturday. One thing is they have given up some points at times and they've given up some plays at times, and it's in spots. You look back early in the season and they give up, I think, a couple hundred rushing yards to Texas San Antonio. You look at the Arkansas game. We all know Bobby Petrino, whatever you think of him, he is a bright offensive mind who's really good at calling plays. Taylon Green, big athletic quarterback. Arkansas puts up 42. The problem is they can't stop A&M offensively. They lose in a close game. Notre Dame put up, 40, I think, in that game, Wes, led by one of the nation's best running backs in Jeremiah Love. So, teams who are really good on offense can cause them problems. They've given up some plays, some yards, some scores in spots. But again, the question that we keep asking, can South Carolina make that matter? Can you go put together more of a complete performance? Can you go have a game where you run the ball like you did against LSU, or you pass the ball like you did at Missouri? But the key is you're probably going to have to mix both of those things and be more balanced, right? This isn't a team that you're going to want to be in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 11, 3rd and 12 against. Really, really bad formula against Mike Elko with how they play, with the creativity that they can show. You're going to have to stay ahead of the change. And frankly, I think you're going to need to try to break their defense down. If you're going to do it, you're going to have to create some explosive plays. And you're going to have to get into maybe not the red zone, but into that, 30, 40-yard area that you mentioned, Wes. Can South Carolina do it and make it matter?
Yeah, and when you do get those opportunities, can you take advantage of it? And that's something where maybe having a new offensive coordinator, maybe being able to go against tendencies over time. If you're not having success, if you're not executing on offense, and then teams start to get your tendencies as well, your OC's tendencies, it makes it just really, really tough sledding. We'll see if just having a new guy out there, if there's a new confidence on the offensive side, but also is there an aspect of this thing where, you're just sort of able to catch, I don't want to say catch them off guard, but in some ways, yes, just catch them on their heels a little bit. Like, there's only so much you can do, right? Like, you're not going to go out there and reinvent the wheel and reinvent the offense, but at least maybe keep them guessing a little bit in terms of what your tendencies are moving forward. I do have a kind of our little segment we do sometimes where we get someone from the opponent's just sort of media team to come on and hang out with us and just kind of give us a little different sort of vibe on things. I do have an interview from earlier today with Jackson Calloway from Aggie Yale. I was actually cutting it and editing it as we were here on the show, so it might take me a second to try to get it
this
going.
Is the second year of
Here
Mike
it is right here,
Elko.
Jackson Calloway.
9 games in,
Gamecocks
undefeated,
Aggies.
number 3 team in the country, looking like not quite a lock, but almost a lock for the college football playoff at this point in time. Ahead of schedule, on schedule, where are we at in terms of where the expectations were at this point for Mike Elko?
Yeah, I think coming off of last year and the fall that kind of happened at the end of the last season, just due to the many reasons, I think that they didn't have the talent. I think the Le'Veon Moss injury, kind of seeing that, I think a lot of fans are kind of down after what kind of felt like a year where A&M could have gotten ahead and they kind of missed on this opportunity. I think coming into this season, a lot of people kind of expected this to be a much better team. But with the schedule, it looked like preseason, everyone kind of thought, okay, this may be another 8-4, maybe 9-3 season. And so obviously sitting here at 9-0 is pretty awesome. But there's still a lot of work to be done. And I think Mike Elko will be the first one to tell you that. But I think right now, like, they have an opportunity to go and do something for A&M that we haven't seen in a long time. And it continues this week in South Carolina.
Jackson, it's Jack. Hope you're doing well, man. You mentioned kind of the schedule there that A&M has had to play this year, and that kind of leads me into my question. You know, look at the schedule. I mean, yes, they went to Notre Dame and won a really tight-knit game, but especially in SEC play, haven't had to play the toughest schedule. I mean, look at it. Auburn, Mississippi State, Florida, Arkansas, LSU, Missouri. All those teams have one thing in common, that they don't have a winning record in conference play. So my question is, how much has that kind of helped A&M get to where they are? And what have you kind of learned about them through what they've had to go through in conference play?
Yeah, and you know, when we have these discussions, and I think especially the college football playoff rankings now, it's a bigger topic than ever. And I think when you look back at the games, and I think even preseason, you probably thought that a lot of these games would be much harder than they were. I think you thought Auburn and Florida were going to be better teams than they've panned out to be. And so when you kind of look at it, I think A&M's still been able to find gutsy wins, especially when you look back at the Auburn game, when everything was being called and you're kind of in a weird spot with penalties and you're not able to quite get going. I think that they've kind of built this reputation, just gut out wins when they need to. And, you know, obviously, like we're saying, A&M, the schedule hasn't looked as great as you kind of expected it to preseason. But that Notre Dame game does loom large. I still think that's one of the best wins in college football. They haven't been properly tested either, but, you know, when looking at the schedule going ahead, I think South Carolina is still a very talented team. You saw them compete with Alabama just a few weeks ago. And then you have Texas here in a couple of weeks who is looking to get better week by week. So I think for A&M, you're going to continue to see, you know, I think the identity will continue to evolve into something else. But right now, I think it's a team that just continues to find ways to win games, especially on the road.
Hey, Jackson, it's Wes. I kind of think of defense when I think of Elko, but, man, you guys have maybe one of the more balanced offenses, explosive. You have a quarterback who can throw it and run it. I feel like maybe just one of the more explosive attacks in the country right now in terms of just being able to do so many different things. But just watching them on a week-to-week basis, what can you tell us about kind of this offense and the steps they've made this year compared to last?
Yeah, so even looking back to last year, I think South Carolina fans know more than anybody that last year A&M didn't really have the weapons to compete after Le'Veon Moss went down. And you saw that it was a really good Gamecock defense that just completely locked down that unit for the rest of the game once Moss went down. This year, it's a lot different. They brought back all their offensive line starters. Early on, there were a lot of penalty issues, but those have since been cleaned up. Marcel Reed has kind of transformed into a much better quarterback, somebody who is more aware of what's happening, and he can really get the ball downfield, whether it's with his arm or have his playmakers do it for him. and the depth that they have at wide receiver now. We talk about Casey and Mario, who are two of the nation's best receivers. But I think when you look at Terry Bussey, Ashton Bethel Roman, there's a lot of guys that can make plays. And you look at the tight end room. The tight end room is much better than it was last year. I think there's a solid identity there. You didn't have a pure blocker. I think that you may have one of the highest graded tight end blockers in the country, Nate Borkheischer. And then the running back room, Le'Veon Moss is out, but they still have the depth there to compete. I think Reuben Owens is a really solid back. And so A&M's really been able to use all this versatility, and they have a lot of breakaway speed at all these positions that they didn't have last season, a year ago. So I think with A&M, the identity has been being able to get Marcel Reed, get it to the playmakers in space, and then allow him to kind of fill the holes with his feet or have the running backs kind of pick up that load.
Jackson Calloway of Aggie Yellow joining us here on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. You mentioned Mario Craver, who did pop up on the injury report last night, is questionable. What can you tell us about his status heading into the weekend?
Yeah, I think heading into the weekend, we're still kind of going to see how these next couple of days go. I don't know if any final decisions have been made there. So I think that's something that we're probably going to know by late tonight, probably early tomorrow. So I'd probably expect an indication on the injury report from that on there. But from a side of him, I think on the injury report, A&M's looking pretty good as well. So we'll see what happens there. But I would assume he may be a go this weekend, but I don't think that they're going to force him to play if they don't think he's needed.
Jackson, just big picture question here. What's kind of the overall buzz right now in College Station? Like, I think around this time of year, A&M fans and college football fans are kind of just used to A&M kind of, filtering out, kind of losing a few games and being out of the college football playoff picture. But this is different. I mean, undefeated still, have a real chance to go to the SEC championship. Is there any worry over these next 3 weeks with a slip up, or is everything kind of just feeling good right now, like they're going to be fine?
Yeah, and that's completely warranted. And there's a thing that we call battered Aggie syndrome, where no matter how good things are going right now, it's going to get bad at some point. And so I think A&M fans have really been fighting that feeling over the last couple of weeks, and it's so far so good. But I think for A&M, just being able to maintain this momentum, I think that this is a team where you have to go out and beat a really solid Gamecock team who the record may not show it, but I think that they're able to make plays to win a football game. Lenora Sellers is still one of my favorite quarterbacks in the whole country. I think that there's been a lot of inconsistency along the offensive line and the run game for them that it may not have resulted in the wins that they want to, but I think it starts this weekend, and we'll kind of see what this weekend means for them. A&M cannot clinch an SEC conference title berth this weekend, but I think if they're able to go out this weekend and get a convincing win, that's a vote of confidence going forward for them.
Hey, Jackson, if there is a weakness on this A&M squad that you can identify, what is it, even if it's something that's maybe not a huge weakness? Like, what would just be going into this game an area of concern where you guys are still saying, all right, if A&M's going to win a championship or win a national title, this is the area that has to get shored up down the stretch?
Yeah, for me, I think two things stand out to me, and they're both on the defensive end. I think the interior, sometimes that they just allow bigger runs. I think overall they've done well they've played a lot of the conference's best backs this season. I mean, they've held them to respectable numbers, but there have been large breakout runs in each of those. But outside of that, they've been really, really solid. And in the secondary, I think that they're still Will Lee has had a little bit of a drop-off from last season. Des Ricks has actually taken a step up, but he is one of those guys that can get handsy at times. It's kind of hurt A&M in terms of keeping hold of that momentum when you have them on 3rd and long and they take a deep shot drop, but there's a PI or whatever it may be. I think that those are two ways that A&M's kind of been hurt this year, and the defense has been great at times. I think the Arkansas game is a big thing for teams to look at in terms of what you can do against A&M, and we'll see if they use it this week. But I think A&M just continues to develop. They're going to be out there starting linebacker this weekend, Scooby Williams, so that may be also a weakness to watch.
All right, guys, that Jackson Calloway chatting with us here on the show. There we go. I don't know what was going on. I could not get my face back up here, Chris. I was clicking the button and it was just not popping up.
Like, yep.
And Anyway, appreciate Jackson hopping on with us and talking about just what A&M has going on and kind of the feel from that, the view from that side of the thing. And, man, let's dive a little bit more into their defense. And I think when you look at this crew on that side of the ball, it has to start with the defensive front. It has to start with the defensive line. And, I mean, quite literally, they're as good as anybody in the country at getting to the quarterback. They're as good as anybody in the country at creating tackles for loss. They're number one in the SEC in sacks. They're number two in TFLs behind only, guess who, Oklahoma, who we all got a firsthand look at what they can do in terms of creating havoc up front. And then on top of it, dude, they're not going to just rush four. I think some teams, old school would be, hey, we have the guys up front. We're just going to rush four, drop everybody else into coverage, and we just love to have our guys sewed up on the back end, right? Well, new school is we have guys up front that can win one-on-ones, and then we're just going to tack on with pressure, and we're not going to let you slide protect because we're going to set you up, and then we're going to send the guy you're not expecting us to send. And so maybe I would say few in the country, Venables with Oklahoma is probably up there too, man, frankly. Few in the country have a better reputation than Elko does of being able to scheme these things up, being able to scheme up these blitzes that get a guy at the very least in a one-on-one, and you have the athletes to win those one-on-ones, or at times you even have, worst case scenario if you're South Carolina, the dreaded free rusher running at your quarterback.
Yeah, and look, I mean, frankly, Wes, we were talking about on the radio show earlier today, a lot of South Carolina's success, or certainly some big plays in that game last year when they put up 44 points on the scoreboard, was absolutely Lenoris Sellers making guys miss when there was a free rusher or a couple guys that got through the line. Yes, he was able to shake some guys off and make some big plays, go run the football. South Carolina is also able to successfully line him up, sometimes a few times in a row, and say, we're just going to run power with Lenoris Sellers, see if you can stop it. And they had a lot of success there. But that was also a South Carolina team last year that, while Sellers made some big plays in that game, it was not just him, right? Rocket Sanders had a long touchdown run, went over 100 yards. Josh Simon had a big game. Rocket had a nice game catching the football out of the backfield too. And South Carolina only had one turnover to Texas A&M's 2. So that was a Gamecock offense in the back half of the season that was humming along a lot better than this one is. A&M probably feels like they're better defensively this year, while South Carolina has taken a step back offensively from what they were last year. So there are going to be situations where Mike Elko is able to scheme up something, or frankly, in this league, you just lose some one-on-one battles. You are going to lose some battles up front. What is your counter to that? Sometimes it may be Sellers making a big play, but you need to have more answers than you've had so far this season. This offense has not been well equipped to handle some of the different things that have been thrown at them. It's not just pressure packages either, Wes. Look at what Ole Miss did. They had a really good plan for South Carolina. Sometimes that was, quote unquote, rushing 2 or 3 guys, which is almost the equivalent of just having a couple spies up front. Let's drop 8 guys. Let's drop kind of 9 guys with eyes on Lenoris Sellers and drop into coverage. And if he bolts the pocket, because the internal clock's going off, let's go get him, right? Does Mike Elko incorporate even some of that into the game plan? And that begs the question of, how does the offensive staff and Mike Furry calling the game, what do we see that's new? Do we see different formations? Do we see more tempo? We all know you can't completely overhaul the playbook, but what does South Carolina tweak going into this game? We already know they've removed some things. They've added some things. What does that look like? And, can you go out there and have more success than you've had?
No doubt. All right, we're going to dive into that more. Then we'll give our predictions and final keys to the game. But today, first, we're going to tell you about our guy, Andy Luedecke from My Perfect Franchise, myperfectfranchise.net, 404-973-9901. Guys, you may be saying, if you're new to the show, what does My Perfect Franchise do? What can they do for me? Well, basically, if you are looking to diversify, if you're looking at business ownership, whether that is kind of as your primary wealth driver or just even a side biz in terms of diversifying and getting a side hustle going, our guy Andy can help you just get that rolling. He is a franchise consultant and franchise owner, and he helps people like you find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. One of the best parts about it, his services are 100% free to you, and he is here to help you if you have any questions about business ownership. So if you've always wanted to own a business, if you've always sort of just had that vision or goal but didn't know where to start, Andy has been right where you're sitting right now. He can help you every single step of the way. And the beauty of it is, if you give him that information we just talked about, he's going to go out and find franchises that match up with those very things for you and then help you get started with them. So if that sounds intriguing, or if you even just want to talk and chat business ownership, our guy Andy, he's there for you at 404-973-9901.
Let's also tell you about the fine folks over at Palmetto Golf and Belts, palmettogolfing.com. And by fine folks, I mean our friend Brandon Cohn, big Gamecock fan, longtime Gamecock Central subscriber. You'll see him hanging out on the Insiders Forum. For those of you that are on the site already, he's always dropping some cool new products, cool specials on there. And you can check out some of those products and specials on palmettogolfing.com. It's November 13th, Christmas season. Time for Christmas gifts. It's right around the corner. If you got a golfer in your life, go check out the custom golf towels, gloves, tees, and belts at palmettogolfing.com. Variety of colors, variety of designs, all custom made. All great products. I've seen them. I've had them in my hands. The needlepoint belts are extremely well made and more affordable than a lot of the other retail or online options that you're going to find out there. He's got the cross design, the state of South Carolina palmetto tree and moon. He's got the garnet. He's got the state of South Carolina blue. Go check him out. Again, palmettogolfing.com, Palmetto Golf and Belts for custom golf belts, towels, tees, and gloves. Everybody who's checked out the products has been raving about them. I think you'll do the same. Go support local and go support a South Carolina fan at Brandon Cohn, palmettogolfing.com.
All right, let's talk a bit about maybe some keys and the latest we have going into this game, Chris. First of all, injury report. We do this show. We record it on Thursday afternoon. If you're watching us live right now, if you're on the podcast, maybe it's a day later. But so that there will be another injury report tonight. There'll be another one Friday night leading into the game. And so as of right now, though, South Carolina appears to be pretty healthy. The one position I think you do worry about potentially more injuries happening would be at offensive tackle, where I think that's a spot you just really can't afford to have more guys banged up. You already are playing Tree Babalade in front of Case and Henry after the injury there. He's out for the year. You already have lost Jatavius Shivers for this game. He was kind of one of your primary backups as well. Could play left tackle, could play right tackle. This past week, South Carolina, or 2 weeks ago, Josiah Thompson was out for a little bit. He's expected back in there. But you've had a situation where, Chris, you've played two true freshmen as your backup tackles at this point. Shed Surratt, who was a left guard, was playing left tackle against Ole Miss. You've seen Damola Ejidahun get in there a little bit more lately. Highly, highly talented kid, but not the situation you want to put him in against, again, going back to our point all week, the best pass rush in the country statistically at this point. So that injury-wise is the maybe one spot I circle and say no more injuries at offensive tackle. And then on the A&M side, it is at least worth mentioning, we talked about it earlier, but Craver, their wide receiver who is part of their duo with KC Concepcion and really part of, they got two or three other guys that Jackson Callaway was talking about who can separate and make plays as well. But still, it is noteworthy if your statistically leading receiver at this point were to possibly have to miss. As we know right now, again, Thursday afternoon, he is questionable, which by design, by definition, means he's 50-50 for Saturday's game.
Yep, and so definitely some injury things to watch there. Nothing really to add there, Wes, other than, kind of thinking through some of the keys for South Carolina, right? And, man, if we just want to get super surface level, like, gosh, if we were putting up a graphic, if you and I were calling the game, I would be so silly as to put up like score points. Like that's obvious, right? Again, I feel like the same way that I have against Alabama and Ole Miss, where you don't want to get out of this game and say, man, Carolina played pretty well on defense, but eventually ran out of gas. Or, Carolina played pretty well on defense, but you're not going to hold a Texas A&M, an Ole Miss, a Bama. Realistically, you're not holding those teams to 14, 17, probably even 21 points. And so do you need a really good defensive performance? Absolutely. You're going to have to put forth a better effort than many teams have put forth against A&M this year. But I keep thinking about South Carolina's offense, and can you unlock what's been missing from this team? And to be clear, there's been a lot missing, whether it's themes that we've seen all year, protecting the quarterback, missed opportunities, decision-making, or just things that have at times been there, here and there, that have not been consistent, right? The passing game, the running game. Can you put together a more complete performance? And so I think you could think of a bunch of little like micro keys in terms of how you're going to do that. But I think you have to hit some explosive plays and you have to stay ahead of the chains. This is not a situation, again, this is not a team built to get into 3rd and 8, 3rd and 12. Even though they've hit some explosive plays this year in those categories against one of the nation's top pass rushes, maybe the top pass rush, like you said, Wes, that's not where you want to live. So you're going to have to run the football. You're going to have to stay ahead of the chains. I think you're going to have to, you talked about this week, you're going to have to break your tendencies to the extent that you've had tendencies this year. And you're going to have to do some things to keep A&M as much as you can off balance, because you got to move the ball and score points to have a chance in this one. And I think you also want special teams to be even. A lot of years you go into this thing with a Shane Beamer coach team saying, all right, special teams can be an advantage. Can you make it an advantage? Well, hasn't been as much the case this year. Some other teams have done some good things against South Carolina from a special team standpoint. We know A&M's very capable with either fakes or in the return game, right? They're dangerous there. If you're South Carolina, can you flip that script and make some good things happen on special teams on the road too? I think you're going to need all three of those phases to kind of orchestrate a turnaround and be a net positive for you in order to score this upset.
Yeah, I think you got to, Vicari's going to have another day, I feel like. This feels like one of those games. I'll say this, man. So it is 11 a.m. kickoff local time for A&M. You remember early in the Alabama game, even though South Carolina was not, didn't really take control of the game, you were kind of going, well, the blueprint is still here for South Carolina to win this game. Like, this is playing out to where even with that pick six, you're going, they're hanging around in this football game. And, some games you're going, well, this, there's a laundry list of things that have to happen for you to win the game. And by 10 minutes into the game, the blueprint has just been crumpled up, thrown away, and you're going, all right, you knew this team didn't have a great shot, and now the shot is even less, and it's just not going to happen today. So I think it starts with you're coming out with a new OC. Beamer has talked about the confidence that Mike Furry carries, just the little different mindset he brings, and you're talking about an A&M team that has, probably not scared of you at all looking at your record. I think this feels like another easy layup is start fast, but if you don't start this game slow if you're South Carolina and win it, in my opinion. Like, you need something good to happen early. You need A&M to be sleepwalking a little bit. You need to go in there and kind of just have that little drive at the beginning of a game when you're the road team and the home team kind of looks around like, that was a little bit easier than I thought it should be. Where did that come from? And then, your sideline gets going a little bit. And so I think there is a path to win any game you play in football. Fortunately for South Carolina, this one is narrow. And so you're going to have to check boxes every single step of the way. But my first check box is not only do you need to survive the first quarter, I think you need to take control. We talk about the middle 8. I think you got to control the first 8 in this game. And just, Gamecock fans need to be on their Twitter fingers talking about, hey, I'm in. I'm tuned in. The SEC Shorts Hope, where she just shows up out of nowhere. They need for Hope to be showing up on the Gamecock sideline and on the shoulders of Gamecocks sitting at home everywhere. That would be the first step for me. If you want to get even more technical, I was thinking about the fact also in the injury report, Jaden Sellers is back. It got me thinking about more. You have some depth at that slot receiver spot. Brian Rowe, to me, looked as comfortable and as good as he probably has at all since he got here 2 weeks ago against Ole Miss. I think your wide receivers have got to go make some plays for you in this game, man. We're going to talk about the O-line, of course, and dealing with sorting out all the different pressures and looks they're going to give you. The only way to truly, I feel neutralize some of that is to get early wins one-on-one on the outside. What I mean by wins is the receiver wins that one-on-one battle and the ball gets out quick. So are there some wrinkles that Furry has put in to get those guys going? Can you get I think the best jump ball receiver on this team, we really haven't gotten to see it much yet, would be Donovan Murph. He's a natural pass catcher. I think the best short burst separator on this team is Brian Rowe. You saw a little bit of that 2 weeks ago, not a ton. I think the wide receivers have got to have a day. I think you're going to have to get the ball out to them. I think the running backs in the passing game, you're going to have to throw to set up the run in this game, I think. It kind of call it backwards a little bit. So can any of those things hit early on? Because it's kind of weird, man. You mentioned how A&M defensively has given up plays, has given up some big days here and there. Their splits are just crazy. Their defensive numbers, rushing, kind of middle of the pack. But you look, UTSA, they gave up 6.15 yards a carry. Then you look, Utah State, 2.2 yards a carry. Notre Dame, 3.4 yards a carry. Auburn, Mississippi State in the 2s. Florida, the low 3s. LSU, 2.22 yards per carry. They had 60 yards on 27 carries. You're going, dude, this is a phenomenal run defense. Then you look at Arkansas and at Missouri, gave a 8.34 a pop to Arkansas and 6.09 a pop to Missouri. Arkansas with 268 yards rushing and Missouri with 207 yards rushing. So I don't know what those teams did that the other teams didn't. I know Missouri popped one or two, and I know Jackson Callaway said they've given up an explosive here or there. I feel like you're going to need Matt Fuller circa LSU's 70-yard blast down the sideline if you're going to win this game, right? You're going to need Perry Orth taking off. How many years ago was that when Perry just out of nowhere hit the that was just a QB draw, wasn't it?
Yeah. Man was rolling. It was awesome.
Mean, you can dream up some ways for this to happen, but it's just got to be a lot of check boxes, right?
A lot of check boxes. Well, and I think that's one of the frustrating things about the offense is a lot of people, and I'll put myself in that category. Sometimes you're looking at it going, geez, it seems an awful lot like some other teams offensively have been able in key situations to scheme up at least the possibility of some easy wins in the passing game. Think about what Oklahoma did, right? They're just out there. Here's a hitch, pitch and catch. Don't have to hold the ball for 4 seconds. Don't have it, and you look at Carolina, and this is not a blanket statement where they've run this on every play, but we've all seen, hey, they're in 3rd and 4. Why are all the routes downfield? And things like that. Mike Furry, maybe as a receivers coach, he might have a little bit more of a mentality of, let's let our guys go make some plays. You're going to have to make them. Texas A&M, they'll mix up man and zone. There's going to be man-to-man opportunities. Can you beat a guy deep? Can you give your receivers some easier routes to take the pressure off of that conversation that we're having about A&M's defensive front versus Carolina's offensive front? Can you loosen some things up? You're going to have to get some one-on-one wins. Got to let players make plays, and that's been one of the frustrations for this offense. Is while it's not the most talented offense in the country by any means, you feel like you've got some players who are at least capable of getting some of those one-on-one wins that we just haven't seen, consistently enough.
Yeah, and man, it's going to be tough, but you never know. That's the beauty of football. We'll see what happens. I had one more thing, and then I completely lost my train of thought. Let's, give our final predictions, man. Will anybody on the Gamecock Central 107.5 prediction contest, will anybody pick the upset, you think?
Yeah, I don't think so. Wes.
If anybody does, it'll be Kendall Smith.
Think so?
Yeah.
I
don't think she will, but if she does, it'll be her.
Yeah, I can see that. I'll go ahead. I will not be picking South Carolina. I mean, I think this is an A&M team that, while not as battle tested as even South Carolina or some other SEC teams have been, they've done what you do. You go through. They've had a couple close wins over Notre Dame, a close win over Arkansas, but they've passed all their tests. And this is a South Carolina team where we've spent all of this show coming up with trying to architect the path of this thing, and given where both teams are, like, it is a tougher path. I think the fair pick, given what we've seen, at least in my mind, is to go with Texas A&M. I've got Texas A&M 31, South Carolina 20. So a little lower than the line, right, Wes? Carolina doing a little bit more offensively than maybe they have in some other road instances, but still at the end of the day, not quite enough. We'll see. That's my pick.
Yeah, I mean, I actually said 31-21. I mean, I typically do not pick blowouts anyway, but, on paper, man, you'd have to really, really be seeing some just crystal ball, seeing the future, I feel like, to pick South Carolina and to be really confident in it right now. Like, you'd have to have woke up in the middle of the night with a dream of what was happening. So just on paper, there's too many different things that go against South Carolina in this game for you to effectively pick them. I think what I'd really like to see and what I'm curious to see is just an offense that finds some rhythm. Can Carolina go out there and give them a fight? And I know that's one of those things where people say, oh, yeah, if we just compete, I'll be happy. But then if you compete and don't win the game, ain't nobody happy. We saw that against Alabama. I just hope we keep it close. No, once you get the thing close, you want to win the dang thing. Yep. If Carolina had hung on in that game, you're looking at least going bowling, So if you get in that spot, forget moral victory, go win the thing. So I do think this is a game where everything's going to have to go their way for them to find a way to, if they're going to find any way to win it. But we'll see. Maybe, just maybe, we finally get the Lenora Sellers go-off game this year that we saw several times last year. Although, Chris, I kind of got a feeling the Aggies took last year personally a little bit. Like, how has South Carolina just under Beamer had such a knack for becoming team Super Bowls?
Marcel Reed talked about that. He said it was personal, and it wasn't specifically, oh, it's the Gamecocks. It's more of, hey, they're one of the teams that kept us out of the playoff. We were on a good run. They beat us, kind of caused us to hit a slide. And, Diego Pavia for Vanderbilt, same thing. He felt like, whatever reasons he may have, I don't want to speak for him, that was probably his worst game last year. And so I think it's just kind of worked out that way when you beat teams, and maybe you expect to, when you lose to teams and you expect to beat them, that can kind of make it personal. So I mean, it's a good thing that teams are circling you more, for sure. Like, you want to be there, but you also want to be in position where you can answer that call. And South Carolina obviously has not had the season that they wanted to in that regard. Maybe they can turn that around next year, Wes, and they can be the one circling games and making them personal.
It is kind of cyclical, it seems. And I did want to throw this out here. This is what I forgot to mention earlier, man. A&M has one of the best third down defenses I have ever seen statistically. And it actually reminds you a little bit of a couple of those Kirby Smart defenses where they were just really, really rolling. But right now, teams are converting just 24% of their third downs. I caught wind of this. It's probably 2 or 3 games ago. At one point this year, about halfway through, opponents were converting 19% of their third down. So that's actually gone up a little bit the last few weeks. But regardless of opponent, that is an insane number, and one that South Carolina, they've not been good offensively at converting third downs. You have to flip that, man. You have to find a way. And I think that's something ultimately going back to something we touched on earlier. If I'm Shane Beamer going into the offseason, what do I sort of value in an offensive coordinator? I want a guy that can scheme things up on third downs, can put you in a position to convert third downs, and can do the same in the red zone. Because right now, third downs, red zones, turnovers are what are winning and losing football games in the SEC. And so we'll see if South Carolina can flip the script on any of those things this week. Parker Fleming's stats say A&M is second in the country in third and fourth down success on defense. So they get you off the field. That's why they are, once again, another opponent for South Carolina that is very good in time of possession. So Gamecocks, not great in time of possession. So just another of the many things we have put on your plate for you to watch going into this weekend's game if South Carolina is going to have any chance to win. All right, we're at the hour mark, so we're going to get out of here. He has been Chris. I am Wes, and y'all enjoy the weekend. Y'all enjoy the game, and then we'll be back next week to talk about it. Good, bad, ugly, in the middle. We'll talk about it next week here on Gamecock Central.